When we think of habits, we often think of our bad habits, the ones that we want to get rid of, the ones we don't want to have stick around. Yet, they're an excellent example of the power of habits. Because what makes them so hard to break is also what makes them something we could turn to our advantage. It's what makes them the things that are easy to forget and not think about, right? So what are the things that you want to have take less energy? The things that you don't want to be thinking about in your life? Is it possible to turn those things into a habit? Let's explore that more today as we learn about the habit loop and how we can possibly make habits our friends. Welcome to The Grit Show, Growth on Purpose. I'm your host, Shawna Rodrigues, and I'm happy to be here with you as your guide for all of us growing together as seekers and thrivers. All right, let's think of all those bad habits, all the things you wish you did not do by default. We always think of smoking as a bad habit. That's like growing up in the 80s, like I did. That was what everyone did on TV and everyone tried to stop the habit of. Both my parents quit smoking when my mom got pregnant with my brother. And that's just something we always knew was a bad habit. People tried to quit, right? It wasn't good for you. And that's always the example we come up with. But there's a lot of bad habits. One of my bad habits is probably picking my nails. I they snag and I just rip them off when they do, which is not a good habit. Something I do without thinking. We all have them, right? And it's a hard habit to break. Also a song that shows you that I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right? Hopefully you got that and you're one of my people. But the beauty of habits is that they take less energy and less thought. So if there are things that we want to have take less energy and become automatic, it's because the neuroscience tells us those things move to a different part of our brain. So why don't we start finding things we want to have be habit that are good things, that are good for us? Like having a habit of always eating soybeans, edamame. I did have that habit at one point in my life because they were in the freezer all the time. They tasted delicious. They're really fun to eat because you kind of pop them out of their shell. And it became a habit. When I came home and I wanted a snack, I grabbed a bag of edamame out of the freezer, tossed it in the microwave oven, sprinkled a bunch of salt on it, and that would become my snack. So it is possible to have habits that are potentially good for you. The trick for that is to really understand the habit loop. The habit loop is something I probably learned about at some point in my life, but reading James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, really helped bring it back to the surface. His book also added an additional step into the habit loop beyond what most of us learned about if we had learned about it or paid much attention to it in the past. Typically, when you think about the habit loop, it really just had 3 phases. It just took phase 1, there's a cue. Phase 2, there's a behavior. Phase 3, there's a reward. So it was cue or trigger, behavior, reward. And that was the basic loop. The one thing that he really added into the conversation was a craving. So cue, craving, response, reward. So that craving, so that thought that the cue wasn't just a visual thing, that there was actually something that you wanted out of it, which a lot of times when I think of it before, the trigger, it was kind of rolled into the trigger or the cue was that there's also like something you were wanting to get out of it before you did that. And that's the reward was usually what you were getting out of it. So there was, with me and the edamame, when I made eating soybeans, part of a habit for me was that there was a hunger, but there was a craving. So there was coming home. The cue was I came in the door, I came home and I was hungry. So that was the craving. And that there was the behavior was that I would get the edamame and the reward was that I was feel full and I'd feel satisfied because I also got to have the fun of popping the soybeans out of their shells. That's part of the fun of having that, right? So there's the cue, the craving. So there's not just the walking in the door was the cue that when I came home, that was what I did when I first came home. There's also the craving that I was hungry or there was something more that was part of that process. So it wasn't as simple as just seeing something. So there was kind of dividing the trigger and the cue into two different things so that you could divide those things out. So in this thinking, when you wake up and your cue is that you wake up and then your craving is you're tired, so you're wanting something to help you wake up, your response is you go get a cup of coffee. And the reward is that you feel more alert and awake because you had the cup of coffee. And so by having like the cue and the craving, like taking the trigger and dividing it into two different things, a cue and a craving, that you can kind of use that to your advantage by working with both of those pieces. So that when you decide that you want to start exercising, that you can give yourself a cue of having your running shoes sitting right on the edge of the bed or your entire workout outfit right on the edge of the bed, so that your cue is you wake up and you see the things you need to put on so you can go get exercise. And the craving to wake up is then the response is you put on the clothes and you go exercise. And the reward is that you feel more awake. And so that you kind of work with a cue and the craving, so that the cue is that you see your exercise clothing or your shoes there to kind of get into that habit to be what you do that, so that you can work with a cue to make something really obvious and something that's right there for you as a cue when you want to be able to have habits that are healthier or better for you. Which is why when folks work with stopping habits such as drinking or smoking, that they need to like not only address the cue and the craving, so that they have cues that they always have a cigarette when they get off of work, or they always have a cigarette after dinner, or whenever they go on a walk, they get a cigarette, or that's what they do for their break at work. And so there's the craving of wanting the cigarette that they're working with, but there's also the cues that they have that bring that up. And so those are the things that you're trying to break. And so for me, like with me talking about me picking at my nails and always breaking off my nails. When I was younger, I would bite them. So I broke the habit of biting my nails, but I still pick at them and pull at them if there's a little piece hanging off of one of my nails. So the cue is that I have a little piece of my nail hanging off. And so the way that I can handle that cue is by fixing that desire to have a smooth spot on my nail by not tearing at it and going to get nail clippers. But that means I need to have nail clippers readily available, right? So something obvious and easily available to make it so that I'm not going to peel off my nails. So you're addressing the craving that you want to have a smooth nail and not have those things hanging off, but you had to have something readily available to address it at the same time. So trying to like address those pieces by giving yourself things inside of that habit loop that are going to be easy to fulfill. So we talked briefly about if you want to exercise, to have a place to put that cue in so that you can work that in there, but also to like figure out what that craving is, right? The craving that would make it so that your response would be exercise. So if you want to exercise because you've learned, which that's one of my few motivators, is that it actually helps with your neurochemistry to help you be able to think more clearly, to be more productive, to be able to be more present. So when you have brain fog, when you're kind of stuck in a problem, you're not able to move through that stuff, and you want to be able to think more clearly and be more focused, that one of the things that addresses that is actually to exercise, whether that be to go on a walk, to dance for 15 minutes, to be able to go for a run if that's your thing, if you have yoga, whatever those type of things that would do to change that state, right? So you're craving more clarity, more focus, whatever else. And so if you have a cue that would help with that. So it could be that if it was yoga was the thing that I like to do, that I could have a yoga mat that was sitting by my desk so I could look up and see that whenever I started to feel that I was having brain fog or I wasn't thinking as clearly or I couldn't focus as much, I would see the mat as my cue to then encourage me to cure that craving by having the response of doing yoga as my way of exercising to get the reward of then having a clearer head and being able to focus and being more relaxed because I did that. So it's working together with the cue and the craving for the trigger to be able to get you to do that piece. And maybe it's the fact that at one point in time, I used to do, it's just like these little like dance things and you try to follow the dance moves on the Wii. And so if that was a thing that I was trying to do and I needed to have a cue for that, I could actually put the Wii remote on my desk. And so that when I was starting to have the brain fog or feeling less focused or knew that I needed to kind of clear my head so that I could be able to be more productive and be more cued in on things, that I would see the Wii remote and remember, oh, I need to go take a 20-minute break and do a little dance-a-thon, and that could be it. Or it could be a playlist, or it could be something else. But to have something to be the cue so that when you had the craving to get to a state of being more clear and more thoughtful, that could be what you could use as what would transition you to that type of an activity as a choice, instead of my solution for that at some points in time was to get up and go get a snack, right? To be able to clear my head and to get me focused off of work and thinking that would help me to get reset and so I could focus better. It's helpful to figure out what you would like to have that you're craving, and then to be able to kind of decipher what in the habit loop you could put in as a cue and as a response. Because oftentimes we're like the response, the behavior is what we're seeking, right? We want to have more healthy food. We want to have more exercise. We want to have more time with our partner. We want to have these other things. So we want this response, but we aren't looking at the reward on the other side of it or the cue and the craving before it. So if we isolate what the response, what the behavior is that we're looking for, we can look on the two other sides and try to figure out what we need to add in to make that loop happen. And as we find that, we can get to a better place. So my husband has a fabulous habit of making me dinner regularly. And I think I've mentioned that more than once in the podcast, how much I appreciate that and how often that happens. So part of that loop potentially that has made that more of a habit is he does it at the same time when he comes home from work. It's part of the routine. But there's also these recipe cards that are potentially a cue for him, which again, I'm speaking for him. That would be my estimation of how well this process works for him, that it becomes more of a habit, that there's a recipe card that makes it easy. So it is kind of back of mind, simple to do. There's a recipe card, and the thing that he might be wanting is actual connection with me, time with me, and the benefit of that, right? And so he sees the card. He's looking forward to our time together when we actually eat dinner, and I'm grateful and we're connected. And the response is he makes dinner, and the reward is he gets that connected, wonderful time with me. How many people make dinner? There is not a simple recipe card and the ease of doing that. And there is no reward at the end of that of quality time over dinner, because dinner is actually people going different directions, people that are stressed, people that aren't paying attention, and there isn't connection, and there isn't really a reward. So it's one more draining thing, right? There's no simple cue of knowing what's going to be for dinner and having a simple way to do it in a place in a day that happens. And it becomes one more decision to make, one more thing to think of, one more thing to figure out. And it doesn't actually turn into this habit. So by having it, so there's a cue and it's simple and it's easy, and it's actually going to have a reward at the end because there's something you enjoy about it. So finding the piece of what you enjoy. So if you're somebody who enjoys connection, if you're somebody who enjoys words of affirmation, to actually make it so that you're getting those pieces, so that part of dinner becomes that everyone goes around and says their favorite part of dinner, what they liked most about dinner, what their favorite dish was, and how much they enjoyed it. And that is part of dinner. If words of affirmation are your thing, that needs to be your reward so that you can turn dinner into a habit, right? And that you have a cue that there is a menu that you've made. So the cue is you walk in, you see what's in the menu, and then you go and make it. So it becomes a habit. So if dinner has become a constant challenge in your house and frustration to have to deal with that you make it more of a habit. And it might even be that it is the same 7 things that Monday night is soup night. Tuesday night is grilled cheese or pork chops or something that you make the same thing every Tuesday night. Wednesday night is going to be salads and pasta. Thursday night is chicken. Friday night is pizza. Saturday night is whatever. So that you find whatever you and your family like to make, and it's the same 7 things that go on a recycled thing. So it's a queue and you have the same grocery list. Like, I have no problem with that. If you can have no problem with that, that's a great way to just make it a habit, make it a queue, right? So it just goes in the same cycle. So it can be more of a habit and it can be less stress on you. When I lived alone, I made roasted vegetables every Sunday night. I made a soup every Sunday night that I would have for lunches, and I would make the salad that I would have for lunches for the week. So roasted vegetables and the salads, and then I would grill either salmon or meats in the evenings. Like, I made my dinners and my lunches. It was just me. It was so much easier to do it that way, right? So you need to find a way that you can make some things more of a habit so they don't take the energy, they don't take a thought, and they become enjoyable, the reward, right? Because I actually do love cooking. I do love spending that time in the kitchen. It's them making the decisions, trying to figure it out, especially after a long day, that it stresses me out. So having it become more of a habit, that my habit was Sunday night was like putting the things together for the week. And that worked really well for me at that point in time. And again, it's changed. So you can get like in and out of habits, but once you make something a habit, it can really stick. And apparently there's this variance of thought that habits can take between 3 weeks and 3 months to kind of stick and make happen. And I loved one of the things that I read once that said that it's 3 weeks for a habit and 3 months for a lifestyle change. And so when I was changing to the way of eating that I did, which we talked about in a previous episode, but you might remember in episode 31, when I got to meet with Jen Stevens and talk about intermittent fasting, that I started doing that some time ago. And it was about 3 weeks in where it really started to feel like this was what I was doing. And 3 months in, it was a lifestyle change. And ever since then, now it's been a year and a few months, I would guess, maybe longer than that. But it became a lifestyle change. And that's what the article I'd read once said, was that 3 weeks is a habit, 3 months is a lifestyle change. So once you've been doing something that long, like, it's really integrate as part of who you are and the way you live and the way you move through the world and do things. So it takes time, but not that much time. 3 weeks, 3 months, like in the scheme of things, that's not that long before you can get in the routine of doing something. But it's also important to make things small and incremental and not try to go big, right? I talked last week in the episode about me adjusting how early I was starting my day and quickly realized that I was waking up earlier. I have been for some time, but I hadn't been starting my work day that much earlier. So I need to stop trying to start it that much earlier and incrementally start it earlier, because you don't know those small changes. And before you know it, they're pretty big changes. But it's useful for you to do it a little bit at a time, which is probably why the hour time change is so hard on everybody, because an hour is too much to do all at once, right? You should do it 15 minutes at a time or a half hour at a time. So start small. And even with exercising, telling yourself you're going to go to the gym 5 days a week is a lot to start, right? Maybe you can just start walking 15 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and then half an hour 3 days a week. And then you can go for 45 minutes, or you can go more days a week. Like, start small and build on things. And that's the best way to do it. And to know that once you do it for so long, it becomes a habit. And the best way to make it a habit is to identify those pieces that you need a reward for it to stick. And you also need a cue, and to identify what you're craving to make the reward fit, to make those things go together, right? So that you can realize if you're craving more connection in your life, then find a way to make it so that you get connection out of dinner so that you're going to want to do dinner. And if you want to get more exercise and you want more connection in your life, then your reward needs to be connection. So that you need to have what you're craving is connection, so that you need to go do walks with a friend or go to the gym with a friend or go to a class for your exercise. And that's how you're going to work exercise into your life, because that's what you're craving. So figure out what you want more of in your life and attach that to what you're trying to get more of in your life when it comes to healthy habits. And that's how you're going to be able to integrate them more. There's also a cool way to deconstruct all of this, to break habits, but that takes up more time than we have today. But that's a great place for you to start. To start thinking about how you can find the things that you want to build as habits. Have less decisions about. Have them be automatic, because it moves a whole different part of your brain when you start doing things more automatically. Think of all the bad habits you have, the ones you'd like to break, how easy they are, and think of all the things that you can move automatically to that you want to have more of in your life. Instead of automatically always having a Dr. Pepper, which is what I used to have all the time, I now have other beverages I have because I break in that habit and replace it with other things. One thing, you could just as easily have it be something else. So think about what you want to have. And for some reason today, I'm only thinking of like exercise and health related things. And I know there's other things we want to have as habits in our life. One of them is me starting my workday earlier, right? So I need to make sure that I have a cue and I have a reward for doing that so that it actually sticks and I actually do that. So hopefully it's given you a little bit of time to think about what you want more of in your life. If it is healthy habits, if it is a dinner routine that you want to become habit, think about your kids and bedtime routines. Wouldn't that be nice to have be a habit? How can you have cues and rewards that make that so it's habit? What do they love and want more of? What is their love language, or what speaks to them to make things happen more easily for them? What do they crave more of in their life that you can make as part of that? Is it cuddled up reading a story because they love having that one-on-one connection time? Is it words of affirmation? So once they get in bed, we talk about all the wonderful things they did that day, and that's associated with finally being cuddled up in bed, that you have that conversation. Do they like getting little gifts, little treats, so that you give them something special once they get into bed? That'd be fun to try to be creative about that. That would be hard for me. I'm not as good at the gifts, but it'd be fun to figure out. As a physical touch, so they would love to have their hands massaged after they've brushed their teeth, done all the things they need to do. They're tucked to bed for the night and they get a nice hand massage because I really love physical touch. Or they get snuggles for 2 minutes before it's time to go to sleep. Things to think about. What are things that you find as rewards, and how can you integrate them into your habit loop and see it as that loop? And integrate the cues so you have something that signals it, but know what you're craving and how that can be part of the reward to put around the things you want to make more of a habit, to make that change. And obviously, this whole episode was kind of talking about what would be, what you want to be able to do. So kind of draw to the top the one thing you'd like to see as that habit and how you could possibly integrate that. And for our self-maintenance minute, we've found a fabulous hike that we enjoy here where we've moved. And I'm very excited about because I really enjoy kayaking, paddleboarding, and it's getting to the time of year to do that. But kayaking and paddleboarding takes a bigger chunk of time. And I tend to not be as good about consistently doing things that take a larger chunk of time. It's harder for me to commit and carve that out. And I know we're going to do more of that this summer, but it does take an actual bigger chunk. And because of various reasons, we couldn't do that this weekend. And so we actually went on a hike that is closer, and it's a nice loop, and it's not that challenging, but it's right by the water, which makes me very happy. And it's something that only takes like a couple hours out of the day to do. And so it's definitely something that could be done every single weekend. It can be done in the evenings. It can be done much more frequently and can become more of a habit. And it's something I enjoy. I love being out in nature, and I feel like we're out in nature and it doesn't take up that much time, especially with the days getting so much longer now. Here where I live in the US, it's that time of year where the sun doesn't go down until much later, and it's getting to the longest days of the year. So that's definitely a little self-maintenance thing of working that in and doing that. And we did that this weekend. It was quite lovely. So that was definitely my self-maintenance piece, was finding a place close by with a nice walk near water a little bit of a hike to get some exercise and get out in nature and have that water sound. I love that sound. Definitely a water girl. So what are you doing to take care of you and to make sure you're doing things that bring you joy and get you in the right headspace and in the right place to be able to give back and do all the things that you need to do for others and for yourself? I'm curious about the habits too. So be thinking about that concept around what you can do that's a cue, but also can meet your craving and have a reward on the other side of it. And what type of things you even want to have a habit around. If you think of something, if you figure this out, I would love to hear from you. Drive me a note on Instagram at the.grit.show or at Shawna Podcasts. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to jump on over to Instagram and follow us at the.grit.show. And if you aren't already following Authentic Connections Podcast Network at 37 by 27, you should definitely be doing that as well. Don't forget, you are the only one of you that this world has got, and that means something. I'll be here next Tuesday. I hope you are too.